Hello, everyone. This is Debra Ruh, and this is Human Potential at Work. Today, I have my mentor and my partner and my podcast producer, Doug Foresta, joining me. I always enjoy when he joins the conversations, and he probably has been, no, he's definitely been my most frequent guest over the years. So I've had him on the show more than anyone else, and I love his voice, and I love the deep conversations that we get to have. So welcome back to the program, Doug.
Well, thank you so much, Deborah. And, today I'm really excited. It's funny how you said, been on more than anyone else. And we're going to talk about today about voice and, how we privilege and devalue certain voices. And,
Mhm.
I've been thinking about this a lot actually recently. And I think I'm guilty of it too, to be honest. Um, but let's talk about this. Maybe you can kind of set the scene for, what we're talking about today about, whose voice do we privilege, whose voice do we devalue?
Yeah, when you said that, when you've been guilty of it, I'm sure I have been too. I'm sure we all at times have been guilty of devaluing somebody else's voice and at the opposite direction, valuing somebody's voice. I remember one time on Twitter, um, there was a tag that was trending. And I remember looking at the tag and thinking, and I've talked about this on air before, but I remember thinking, are you brave enough to join that conversation? Because there was some really silly things being said. But what the tag was white privilege. And so people were saying just ridiculous stuff out there. But I thought, as a person that I didn't pick the color or the family I was born into. I just, I was born in South Florida. I mean, in South US. I was born in North Florida. And I happen to be Caucasian. My ancestry is very, very English. I'm almost 85% British. And then the rest of it is Norwegian and Irish. So I'm just very Caucasian. And it's just who I am. But I went on and I said, with my white privilege, I am opening the doors to others to come in and have a more robust conversation. And so we all are privileged in some ways. We're privileged that we are born, say, if you're born in the United States developed country or the UK or others, you're we can all find negatives and positives about everything, but there is subtleness the way we sometimes treat each other. And I am openly talking right now about one of my partners, Huawei, about what's happening with Huawei in the United States. And I'm concerned about it because Americans are going to get hurt. Americans are going to get hurt because we don't have good rural options for telecom. And I worry about other things. And I don't know, don't remember countries attacking a corporation. So it's just, I don't understand the rules. But one thing I did like when Huawei brought me to China twice, they never tell me what to think. They never tell me, I mean, certainly they're talking their side of the story and they're telling me what they're doing, but they're not telling me what to say. And I had posted something online today because Huawei is going to use our court systems to figure this out too. And I think it's very smart of them to use what they have at their disposal in the United States. We care about our legislation and we are very active with our litigation. And so this man who I know said to me online on LinkedIn, well, Deborah, if you do some research, I know you think this is bad and unfair, but if you would do some research, you would see that it is fair what we're doing and we have other options. Well, I was so insulted by that because I have done so much research, just so much research. But this man also said to me one time, I was at a UN meeting with him, excuse me, in Brussels, and I got hot and I took off my jacket, and I'm going to take off my jacket right here. And I have sleeves. I don't have a shell on, but I had a sleeveless shirt on and I got really hot and I took off my jacket, and he leaned over to me and I was about to go and speak. And he leaned over to me and he said, you should dress like her. And he pointed to this other woman who was beautiful. And he said, and you shouldn't be showing your shoulders. And I wanted to slap him. I was so insulted because how dare you as a man tell me how to dress, number one. Number two, I'm in Europe. I think they can handle my shoulders. And stay in your lane. And so this guy just never stays in his lane, and he knows what he's doing. He knew that he was trying to unnerve me in both situations. He was trying to make me feel small, and which is interesting. Is that true, Doug? Can you make anybody feel small? But I feel as a woman, he was attacking my credibility in both cases. And I found it very insulting. So I
Well,
thought, good time to have this conversation.
absolutely. And so let me say, I mean, obviously, this is a pretty extreme example. Like and if I could, if we had like one of those bleep, things, I would bleep myself and be like, go bleep yourself, you
Right, right, right.
bleeping, 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 bleeping. So, you know, that's how I feel about it.
How it is like, don't be defensive, Deborah. Don't be
Well,
defensive.
but I also
But
think
I
that
knew
it's
he was going after me.
right,
He was trying to unnerve me. Oh,
right.
that you do a little research, little
But
woman.
that's
Yeah.
where we need, as the organization, a call to men, talks about, calling out and calling in.
Hmm.
And as men, like I would like to think, I'd hope if I saw that behavior, that's an opportunity to go over to someone and say, listen, hey, that's not cool. What you just did there, that's not okay. Like, we don't do that. you know
Right.
so calling out and calling in, that's kind of a calling out behavior, because that's really egregious, right? How dare you? The whole, like, if you would do some research, obviously, is also devaluing. you know
That's right. Yeah,
it,
it's like I'm not smart enough to talk about this topic. So
that's
why
right.
don't you go do some research? Because I know you think it's bad and unfair. So I also understand he was trying to unnerve me, and I just went right back at him and I said, well, I'm going to stand with Huawei on this because I do think it's unfair because I've done the research, and
Right.
I personally live in a rural area in Virginia that doesn't have access to the internet, and I have to pay $250 a month
Right.
for often really not very good internet. So I know it's a problem, and I know that
Right.
many other Americans and others in rural parts are going to be hurt by these decisions. And the good news is now Huawei is going to get in the court system, and let's let the courts do their research and decide who is right in this situation. That's why we have the court systems. But don't insult me just because I'm a woman. I know that's what he was doing. He was insulting me as a woman. So,
And it's so it made me think about, I've been thinking about this lately. I was talking to my wife about it, how we have, almost exclusively, had white male voices as the prism through which we see everything,
right,
everything. And,
right,
if you look at right now, the way that I'm not, this isn't about like whether you're a Democrat or Republican, but it's just a fact that if you look at, Kamala Harris just dropped out of the race,
I know. I was sad to hear
leaving,
that.
right, leaving white people and Andrew Yang possibly. Uh,
Which I like
sorry,
Andrew
Cory
Yang too.
Booker, but I don't know if he's going to
Yeah,
make it. Right,
yeah,
he
yeah, yeah,
also,
yeah.
Corey seems to be
I like
also,
Corey too.
falling off the cliff there. So what it looks like shaping up is that it's all white people, and increasingly, with the exception of maybe Elizabeth Warren, white men. And so here we are back
Right,
to, like, how do we get back here to this place of, right? We're so diverse, like, we're so diverse, we're so progressive, we're so whatever. And on the Republican side too. In other words, because
right, right.
we should also have diversity among Republican candidates. I mean, people should be allowed to be conservative, and conservatives, we should have diversity of thought, diversity of everything. And so I've just been thinking about that a lot, um, how we privilege, you know, who gets to say what, and the ways in which we have to be careful about not devaluing, like you said, the fact that he said, if you do your research, it's like, well, what made you think I didn't do my research?
Right. I was just a little naive woman that doesn't know what she's doing. And
Right.
even when he made a comment about me taking my jacket off, I
Well,
mean,
that's
I
just,
was a
yeah.
woman, right? At the time, a woman in full blown menopause. And if he had any
I
brains,
wish
he
I'd
would
been
know.
there, Deborah.
You know, I just was, it made me so mad. And also, once again trying to make me feel bad about who I am because I'm not as beautiful as this other woman, which, by the way, she wouldn't have wanted to be used that way either. And so devaluing each other. And then you start getting into the diversity, and you start getting into women with disabilities, men with disabilities, the disenfranchised groups, and they're even more disenfranchised than someone like me, because I do have I am a Caucasian, I am white. And so it's we do it it's interesting how we do it, the subtlenesses and the nuances. And I know for sure that he was trying to, he was subtly, or not so subtly
Not so
attacking
subtly.
me.
Yeah.
Right, right.
And by the way, let me be clear that you didn't need me to be there. I just wanted to be there.
I
I know you
know,
can.
and I would
I know you're
appreciate you
fully
being there.
capable of defending yourself. I just wanted to be there. But the yeah, I mean, and let me just say something too about what you talked about privilege. Um, you know, people may be familiar with Jennifer Brown and her work. And
Yes,
one of the
she's a
things that
wonderful
she
voice.
started talking about, which I like, is using the word advantages rather than privilege,
Ooh,
which
I like
sounds
that
less,
better.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
less judgmental in a way. Like privilege just sounds like,
yeah.
life is hard. So like when you hear the word privilege, people are like, F you. Like I don't feel very privileged, you
Right,
know? So,
right.
but if you say to yourself, okay, I've had advantages in life that maybe other people haven't had. But the difference is you use your advantages to lift other people up.
Right.
And it's not bad to have advantages. In fact, it can be very
Mm-mm.
helpful. I mean, would it help if you were just completely, if you had nothing to work with? I mean,
Right.
and let's say there are many advantages that you've worked hard to get, like your
Hmm.
social media following and your leadership, and you know,
And my
but you use
technological knowledge,
your
because I'm
technological knowledge.
very knowledgeable about technology, and I'm
Right.
proud to be a woman in tech.
Yeah. But
So it was like,
you always use those advantages and that knowledge to serve the community of people with disabilities, and I would argue the larger global community of just human beings.
I agree.
Um,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, because you're right. And I know you have two daughters and you
I
have a
do.
son on the spectrum.
I
And
do.
what do we teach these young people? And I was just at a Huawei event in San Francisco where they're talking about their tech for all and their tech for good. And any corporation that is working hard to include the community of people with disabilities and every other disenfranchised group, I'm on your side. I'm on your side. So,
Yeah,
and I'm on the side of any brand that's trying to make the world a better place. And I noticed just little things they were doing, and I'm noticing this more when I speak at conferences. They were being very deliberate to have a very it was a robust agenda, but also they were very cautious about the diversity of the panels. There was never just an all white male panel. They
that's good.
always had diversity, and they had a lot of different types of diversity. And I really applaud that, including young people, very young people coming up and talking about the start of their career and how can they do it and what can they get involved with and how do they make a difference. And I think generational diversity is powerful and very important. And I think that we all need to pull together and try to help all of us, achieve more so that the world can be a better place for everybody. We need digital inclusion. We do need tech for all and tech for good. And we do need disability inclusion and LGBT inclusion and more gender inclusion and blah, blah, blah. All the things that we talk about all the time. But it's interesting how certain voices and we talk about it, sometimes we call them social media trolls, in that it seems like their only thing in life is to try to make somebody feel uncomfortable or just add a little bit of controversy or just
Yeah,
being mean spirited online, or in person or in your car,
right.
right,
And
or where else, yeah, your workforce.
yeah, I mean, and then there's a line between, and I said I suffer from it myself. I think there's like trolling, which I don't do, and
Hmm.
then there's just the 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 inescapable fact that, I was thinking about this with movies, right? And the if you think about movies of the last 30, 40 years, almost exclusively every story that we go to watch is told through the prism of an able-bodied straight white male. If there are women in the movie, they're love interests, or they're the guy's daughters, right? Or they're whatever, they're the receptionist.
Or may I say one thing? Or the program starts with the women getting killed, brutally killed and
Right,
raped, and then we're going to solve the mystery. And I have said there are so many good shows out there that I want to watch because the content is rich, but they start with killing women or hurting women,
right.
and I just won't watch them. I just don't want to be part of it, because just because you're a beautiful young woman doesn't
Right.
mean
Your function is to be killed so that,
right.
right,
And,
so
and
we can
that's how
then
they
follow
use
this.
us.
Yep.
It's always going to start with almost always look at it. I mean, the majority
Yeah.
of these crime shows start with women being raped, molested, killed.
right. So think about how many movies I've watched, since I was a kid. How many TV shows? How many books have I read? All of them, almost all of them, human experience is seen through the prism of straight white men,
Yes.
and so it's hard not to see the world. And I am one, so it's hard not to see the world through that lens, and that's what I mean by that. I'm guilty of it. Is that it's only recently really dawned on me how small a window, how small a lens, I often see the world through, um, and there's so much richness to other stories. I guess what got me thinking about it was I've been reading Howard Zinn, history of the people's history of the United States. Have you ever heard of that?
No, but it
Oh,
sounds interesting.
it's a
I
great. It's history told through the other lenses. So it's like
Wow.
Columbus, the story of Columbus, but through the Native
Yeah.
American
Right.
perspective, or
Oh, totally need to read that.
and it just never dawned on me. I knew the book existed, but I never actually read it. And so as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, oh my God, yeah, like there were there were other perspectives.
Right, right. What did they say, that history is written by the winners?
Yeah,
You know, and I know that I was looking at, all of this and having these conversations, and I find that, you know, when I was talking on stage at Huawei a couple of days ago about Tech for All, we started talking about the data and artificial intelligence, and the data that we have. It is all, once again, white males data. We have,
yeah,
whenever we are, and they're getting better about this, but often medicines and stuff, when they're doing the trials, it's all
right.
being done for men.
That's right.
And so women, when we have heart attacks, we finally understood that women experience different symptoms with a heart attack than a man does. And so you've got to apply it to the right lens. And so, and I was, we were talking on this panel about, the opportunities we have. And I think artificial intelligence has the real potential to be an equalizer
Right.
and set a lot of level playing grounds. But we have to show, just like we're talking right here, that the data is biased. It is biased deliberately and unconsciously. And so, once again, it's really cool that we're going to have robo judges and some of these really cool things that the author of Human 3.0 is predicting. But the data we have right now, years and years of case files where we've been putting people of color, people with disabilities in jail so much
Right.
more prominently than white people, and people
Yeah.
that have money and the advantages, using Jennifer's word, of wealth and stuff. And so the data is already unconscious, conscious and consciously biased.
Yeah.
So if we don't have good data, we're going to train these robots, these artificial intelligence, bad data. We're going to build the bias right into it.
Right.
And that's definitely a problem.
Yep. Exactly. So we shouldn't act as if the, artificial intelligence isn't going to solve this for us.
Right.
We have to be more consciously aware that there are so many other stories. There are other stories that aren't told, there are other perspectives that aren't that are again that are just consciously devalued. And I think your example of this guy is a great example, because ultimately what he's telling you is shut up.
Right, right. Go sit down, little lady.
Yeah,
You
go
go
sit
sit
down.
down and don't even. And I know that I'm being defensive about it, but I am not going to put up with that at 60. I
Yeah,
will not put up with that anymore. I put up with that my whole career as a technologist,
yeah,
and I will not put up
yeah,
with that anymore. And I won't be mean about it, but I will say, oh, I have done my research, and let me
right,
tell you, I'm writing a book about this. I'm doing
exactly,
research all the time,
right,
and I do know what I'm doing. And one thing I really appreciate about Huawei is that they haven't told me what to think. All they're doing is presenting me the data. And once again, good for them to go to our court system. If
yeah,
you think you're being treated unfairly in the United States, we
yeah,
have this beautiful court system. Yeah, we've got some bias in there, but we have we have systems in place. And so if you don't think you're being treated fairly, that's something you can do in the United States. But it was just very interesting watching it. It was like this other man who I blocked. um, that was married to a friend of mine. Luckily, she's not married to him anymore. But this woman wrote that about her baby with Down syndrome going to school for the first time in September. And you know, this mom, well, all of us parents get nervous when our babies go to school for the first time, but she was worried about her child with special needs going into school. Would it be treated fairly? And she titled it, "My kid with a disability deserves to be going to school with your child." You know, and he's like, "No, they don't. They hold everybody back." And I was a high school teacher, and people with disabilities in the classroom were so disruptive. And I was like shocked that this man would say these things.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, totally disagree with you, because I believe diversity, and we know this diversity equals innovation. It
Right.
equals, we know this, we have so much good data. And when you don't have the diversity in the conversation, you make really stupid, big, bad brand mistakes. And we have lots of examples of that. You can read Inclusion Branding for some of the bad examples.
That's right.
But the so it's a huge issue, and it's at a time when everything's changing, everything's being disrupted, and we have to talk about these things, Doug. That's one reason why I love when you're on air, because as you know, a social worker, a psychologist, you, and I know I always get your official title wrong, but I know that you're a professor and you teach this stuff. And so it's something that we have to have these really important conversations. I remember when we were talking about, should social good work be, should you be paid for,
Right. Yeah,
doing
that's one
work
of my
that's
favorite episodes.
valuable
Yeah.
to the world? I know we've gotten so many positive comments about that
Yeah.
episode, because we that somehow have decided that if you're doing good work, you're either a bleeding heart,
Yeah.
you don't understand how the real world works or whatever. It's very insulting how we treat people trying to change the world.
Yeah, most definitely. And we just systematically devalue the experiences and the stories and the wisdom of really anybody that's not a cisgender straight white male. And that isn't that isn't me saying that to score points with anybody. Like I'm not saying that for I'm just saying that because I think it's hard to argue that in the West, that hasn't been the case. And I what's amazing to me is, I guess because it's been going on for so long, that it's going to take a lot to change that. But one of the things that's going to change it is people like you who are on social media. I mean, one of the nice things now is that you can create your own platform.
Right.
So you've created your own platform. Nobody gave you this platform, right? And so you say, I don't want to be defensive. It's like, you're not being defensive. You're just standing up for what you know is right, and you're not going to tell me to be quiet. And
Mhm.
I'm not going to, I'm not going to go off into the sunset because you think I should. And so you've developed that platform for yourself. And I think that's one of the exciting things, is that social media does allow for more diversity of voices. Um, and that's why I'm more hopeful that it will change. But it's really hard when you look at, things like, where do we end up with the Democratic Party, where, we started out with like a pretty diverse range. And then by the end, it looks a lot like the Republican side that we
I
always,
know.
and so, um, I think it's telling. Same thing with leadership. I mean, if you look at leadership books, boy, you would
Mm.
really think, if you look at the top selling leadership books, you'd really think that old white men are the ones who know everything about leadership. They must be the wisest people because they're the only ones at the top of the leadership range. And again, that slowly is changing, but you know, it's still true.
It is true. But and also then there's that reverse side that I think about, in that people like you, people like my son Kevin,
Yeah,
and there's so many other examples. David Perez. The There is a place for white men too, and we don't need white men just to be quiet, go home, be
right,
quiet, hush. We still need the white men in the conversations, but
right,
we do need to be more deliberate. And once again, I was at the I speak a lot, and I was on a panel, and at another conference, and they said, "Ooh, Deborah, we're going to switch you from this one panel to this other panel
right.
because we have no diversity." We have no diversity on the panel. So, and they were right. I got up there, and there were, it was a panel of men and myself, which was great to do diversity. And
Yeah,
I know a lot of male allies are saying, don't invite me to speak on your panels if it's all males. If it's all white males, don't invite me because I'm not going to do it. If you
Yeah.
don't have, some diversity.
Right.
And so men, white men and other men
Right.
are really standing up and saying, no, I'm not going to be part of this, like what you're
Right.
doing. I'm not going to be part of it. I want to be aware. I'm noticing this. We need to be more deliberate. Have we given it? So it's like what we don't want to do is say that all white men are bad and just you had
Right.
your
And I
time
don't
now
want to
go.
stop.
And I know you're not saying that, but I also just think it's important that we say that too, because men are committing suicide. White men are committing suicide in larger numbers than we've ever seen before. So obviously I know you're not saying that, Doug. I just thought that would be an interesting part to bring into this.
No, no, absolutely. No, I appreciate that. And yes, I don't want to stop existing. So
We
so
need
I
your
definitely
voice,
am not saying,
Doug.
definitely not saying that white men are bad.
I know
I'm
you're
not
not.
even saying that. It's more about how we position ourselves, right? Like, so it's exactly what you're saying. It's about being side by side with people
Yes.
rather than, the problem isn't that you're a white male. That's not a problem. That's just the fact of, happenstance of your birth. The problem is when you're on top of the podium and everybody's underneath you. And
Yes.
you got
Yes.
to come off the podium, let a make some space for other people, but
Hmm.
just be alongside people and use your advantages to lift
Yes.
other people up instead of holding them back. It's what you do with advantages. It's like I said, it's not bad to have advantages. It actually is helpful. It's like having money.
Right.
It's not
Right.
bad to have money because you can't do much without it. You can't do much
Right.
in life if you don't have some advantages. You got to have
And
some
you can
advantages
help
along with
so
it.
many people with your advantages, as you're
It's
saying.
what you do with it. It's do you then use it just to make your life better, but everybody else's at the expense of everybody else's life, or do
Right.
you lift other people up? So I actually think that white men have a particular opportunity. We have a particular opportunity to be alongside other people and then be with them rather than be over them.
Right. Right. And also, it still is what you were saying, about even though we're consciously trying not to do it, all of our candidates are white, you know,
Yeah,
darn it. Well, not all of them. We have a few that aren't, but and all of the best business books, the best selling, they are. And so it's really important that we acknowledge this.
that's
And
right.
then we say, well, that's interesting. Why are we doing this? Are we, are we not, having others come to the conversation? Are we not being good allies? I know that when I was speaking at the UN a few weeks ago, one of the things that I was suggesting is that we have more representation of people with physical disabilities because you don't know if a person has a disability. You could have a disability and a person doesn't know it because you
That's right.
can't see it. It's many invisible disabilities, and most disabilities are invisible. But that's why it's important to include people with different physical disabilities, males and females and different genders, gender fluid, all of the stuff that we need to do. We need to be more deliberate about it, and we need more to be very deliberate about age, diversity as well. So I have heard, I was talking to some people my age the other day that I really care about. These people are very good people. And somehow we got on this conversation about the millennials.
Yeah.
The millennials, they don't want to, well, it's somehow the conversation went into trash the millennials. And I said, okay, but think about it like this. So the millennials are saying to us in this particular example, they were saying, you baby boomers, go ahead and retire. My gosh, you've had the stage. Now it's time to turn it out, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And your generation, Doug, just gets totally ignored in the conversation.
It's true.
But it's talk about the silent generation. But, and so I had said to my peers, I said, well, they're not allowing their employers to treat them like we were treated. You were a young person, go be quiet and we'll tell you what to think.
That's right.
And I was always treated that way as a woman. And I never thought about it, but I've always been a risk taker too. I worked for
Yeah.
a very large corporation coming out of high school because my parents worked for it. And I got there and I was making really good money, but I thought, I hate my job. I just did
Yeah.
not like this job. And everybody else hated their jobs too.
Yeah.
But they were tied to mortgages, and they were tied to
Right.
kids' colleges, and they were tied to all these things. And so what they used their money for was to buy a better life. And I was 19 at the time, and I thought, oh no, I'm not going to work for a job I hate my whole life. But the millennials, they've gotten that,
Yeah.
because there were, and they're saying, well, no, I'm not going to work for a corporation if you're letting sexual abuse go on. And
That's
I'm
right.
not going to work for you if you are not including, everybody in this, in the conversations, and as clients and as employees. And so I was just saying to my peers, maybe the millennials actually are right about
Yeah.
these things, and we should have stood up for the we should have stood up against these things too. And they were like, oh, that's a really good point.
Right.
So I think sometimes just tweaking the conversation so that we can think about things in a different way, instead
Yeah.
of making an entire generation bad.
That's
What
right.
can we learn from this generation? Is the same thing. What can we all learn from each other? How can we open the door so that everybody can participate, so that the young people can participate, so that white
Yeah.
people can participate, so people of all colors, of all genders, all religion, whether you believe in God or not. I think we've got to keep, during this time of such disruption, and we're not finished disrupting yet. Lots of disruption still going to happen.
That's right.
I think we have to have these really authentic conversations. That's why I like talking to you, Doug, because this is an authentic conversation where you think, well, Deborah's got everything, because, but I know people make a lot of assumptions about who we are.
Sure.
But I've worked so hard, so hard. I've spent so much of my own money. I,
Right.
but what is money good for if it's not circulating and making a difference in the
Yeah.
world? So, and just the little ways that people, they think they're being clever, and that we don't know that you're trying to undermine me. But
Right.
we know. This man, I knew immediately where his energy was coming from. He was like, "Shut up, little girl, go sit down. You don't know what you're talking about." And I thought, yeah, no, no, no,
So
you're not going to talk to me
we
like that.
should thank him for the
Yeah,
opportunity to have this conversation, right? Thanks for being
yeah,
such
yeah.
a jerk.
God, I know, and I haven't blocked him yet. But if he
I feel
keeps
bad.
saying stupid
Is
things
this
to
guy
me,
married? Is he married?
he is married. I think he is
I,
married, and it's. I don't understand people like that, but I think if you're around people enough, they'll tell you who they are. And I
they
remember,
will.
yeah, Maya Angelou said, that once, she said this to Oprah: when somebody tells you who they are, you have to believe them. And that
That's
was
right.
hard for me to learn that lesson, because I would see people, especially team members, that I knew had more potential than they were
Yeah.
showing. I knew who they could be, but they didn't
Right.
believe it themselves. So if somebody doesn't believe it themselves, Doug, I don't know what you do with that.
And you know what's really awful is think about, like, just from the perspective of, we have no idea, no way of knowing. Did we, was there a woman who would have discovered the cure for cancer,
Right.
who never went to med school, right? Was there an indigenous person who could have solved climate change that was killed? you know,
Right.
I mean, we have devalued so many people. So to just have this one band of people and say, these are the people, who've created civilization, these are the people who've contributed, and these are the only ones who have something to contribute, is actually even not helpful to anyone. And we'll
Mm.
never know. We will never know the voices that we've silenced over thousands of years.
No.
But we have an opportunity. We can't do anything about that, but we have an opportunity now to lift up other people, because it's in all our best interests.
Right. That's so well said. It's so well said. It's you have two baby girls at your house.
I do.
What are they going to do? I mean, how are they going to change the world? And how can people change the world if we bother to let them have a voice and a seat at the table? I
That's right.
think, and I know the UN is really good about trying to make sure that all the different voices are being included, generational, people with disabilities, different
Yeah.
disabilities. And I just think, I continue to think that we're stronger together. And I know that was a political campaign for a former candidate, but I love it. I love it. We're stronger together.
Yeah.
And I
It is true.
love what Michelle Obama said, in that when they go low, we go high.
Yeah.
And I believe that, but I, I love how you put it just then in explaining it, because no, we didn't know. Now we do. Now we know better. Now we know that that child that's born with cerebral palsy, that is a person of color, and maybe they're a woman, a girl, a female
That's right.
too, maybe they're the ones that are going to change the world. Look at Greta, that
That's right.
is, she's on the spectrum, and proudly on the spectrum. And says this is her super, she's a super, her super strength.
Yeah.
It's her superpower. So I think it's really hopeful about what's happening, Doug. And I know
Yeah.
that you teach young people. You're teaching them, how to be, clinical psychologists. But what are you seeing from the young people in your classroom?
Yeah, I think young people have a very different. It is very different. They have much more of an expectation about diversity, and they don't have the. Um, they don't have. I think back. I mean, if you're Gen Xer,
Blinders.
yeah, if you're a Gen Xer, you have a lot more in common with Boomers than you do with Millennials or Gen Z. So there's just much more of an expectation. There, Hi, Rose. I'm gonna I'm gonna go ahead and I don't want to silence her, but I'm gonna remove her for right now.
Okay.
Or should we leave it?
Rosemary will be right back. Okay.
We'll be back, Rosemary. All right. I feel bad about that after all my but we're gonna have her on. We just not on
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, she
just
she
to be
made she just made a little guest appearance because we love Rosemary
which is
Musacchio.
cool. Which is cool. So
Yes, yes,
so
yes.
anyway, yeah, I mean, just to wrap it up to say that, yeah, I think there's just much more of a you're not going to get Gen Z talent working for your company if you're a bigoted, you know, organization
You really aren't.
that
If you're
or even if you're
you're
not
you're
bigoted,
not
but you're
dealing
just
with sexual abuse, you're not
yeah,
hiring a diverse workforce, they will not work for you.
they
And if
will
they
not
find
work for you.
out, and they'll leave. And I applaud them for doing
Yeah,
that. I just had
I
a
know.
wonderful friend. She's a younger woman, and
Yeah,
she just left a big corporation. She was being courted by
yeah,
two other big corporations, but the corporation she was working for, the
yeah,
man she was working for, was abusing her. I mean,
right.
and
And
so
yeah,
she left.
and you can't tell me that women of any age wanted to work in these. They did it because they really didn't have a choice.
Hmm.
They're. I
Right.
mean, so the whole other thing we can go into, but just to say that yes, I'm hopeful in the sense that this generation demands diversity, and they will not accept. They just won't accept the things that we've accepted, and
Hmm.
I mean, ultimately, again, in a whole other episode, but I mean, basically, like it looks like a lot of the pop culture of the '90s is gone. If you take away like so many artists,
Yes, I know.
comedians,
Right.
I mean, unfortunately, it turned out that they had a lot of problems, and there was a lot going on that was enabled, and we're learning about this now, and um,
A
but
lot's being revealed. It's
a lot.
exciting. It's actually it's exciting.
Yeah.
So
So hopefully
yeah.
we're moving into a time where, like I said, where there's more, that there's because of social media, because of the authentic conversations, that we're moving into a place where hopefully everyone can truly have a voice.
Right, right. I agree. I agree. And I appreciate your voice, and I appreciate that you stand beside me and that you support women and others. And I think we all have a role to play, and we all should be included. Even white men need to be still be included.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. I still want to be
Yeah.
included. I want to make that clear.
Yeah, it just is good for us to have a diverse conversation,
Yes,
and to try not to you know try to hurt other people. But if you do that, we see what you're doing. Nope, we're not going to put up with it. And maybe we'll even talk about it on air. So
that's right.
so I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the audience and everything we're doing. Um, and stay tuned for another episode where we are going to talk to Rosemary Musacchio.
That's right.
She did a little guest appearance for us today. But Doug, thank you for your voice, your wisdom, everything you're doing. Your daughters are lucky to have you, your wife, and
Thank
your
you.
beautiful son, who has such potential and is also going to be on the show in the future. I'm looking
That's
forward
right.
to
Yep,
interviewing
we're gonna get
Sam.
them on.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. So, but thank you to my audience, and tell us what you're thinking. Are you seeing the same things? Do you have any suggestions? let us know what you're thinking. Let us know any guest ideas you have, any topics you want us to talk about. But we really want to talk about these very important topics that some people are afraid to talk about, but we're not afraid. We're not afraid. So thank you, Doug, and thanks
Thank-
everyone. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.